Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gumpert, editor of MSDynamicsWorld.com. This week, we are bringing back the news review, and with it, our assistant editor, Dan Morneau. Much news to review this week, largely around Summit and Directions AMIA events. The topics include Tenerife, the future of NAV, Dynamics 365 Enterprise, hybrid and on-premise plans, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and more. So, Dan, hi. Thanks for coming back to us here. And what do we have first?
A pleasure to be back. First off, we've got stories from UG Summit Nashville and from Directions AMIA. Jason attended both of these and wrote numerous pieces and hosted podcasts from there. And let's begin with NAV and Tenerife. Our first story is Summit 2017, Microsoft assures Dynamics Nav users of their place in roadmap to Nav 2018, Dynamics 365 Tenerife.
Yeah, so this was the, really, I would say the culmination of some careful honing and crafting of messages and guidance about what's coming up for the future of Dynamics NAV and Dynamics 365 Tenerife. And what we now know is that there will be a NAV release before the end of the calendar year 2017. It's due to be released on December 1st. And looking ahead further into 2018, what we'll see is that NAV will continue, but it will almost definitely get a rebrand into the Dynamics 365 family. Right now, it's being referred to as Tenerife. That's just a code name, though. It will be something else. And really, I don't even think Microsoft knows yet what they're going to call it. At one point during Summit, Microsoft GM Marco Perisic actually said to the audience at a general session that it could end up being called 365 NAV. I was really surprised he even threw that out there because it doesn't sound like it's really the plan, but I think the point was they don't know what it's going to be called. Regardless, I think it just showed that there is a roadmap and it's going to be more incremental than Microsoft had initially said it was going to be. And that, what I mean by that is if you go back to Directions AMIA, and then before that, you go back to Directions North America a few weeks prior in September, the message was not exactly the same. And we've talked about that. I did a podcast on site at that Directions North America event, for example, where I chatted with Todd McDaniel about our impressions of that event and some of those points that were rough edges at the time. And we knew we were going to be revisited. And so that's why I said, when I just started speaking, that the Summit presentation was really a culmination of honing and reshaping some of those plans to reduce the freakouts and keep existing customers happy and confident that their product was safe and stable and moving forward in a responsible way. I don't think that was ever really in danger, but Microsoft made sure to communicate that quite clearly. And I think that the NAV attendees at Summit appreciated that. There was some really careful listening. You could just tell, and there was some good applause, I think, in response to the precise messaging that they provided on this stuff.
Okay. Next from Directions AMIA 2017, beyond Madrid, Dynamics Nav partners are eager for more Microsoft long-term vision.
This was an interesting piece, and this was sort of part of the wrap-up. So we were a media sponsor. MS Dynamics World was for Directions AMIA, and it was so we worked with their organizing team to help sort of cover the event beforehand, during it to some extent. I wasn't actually at the event, but was in contact with people there, and after the event, speaking with Christian Sega, who is the chairman of Directions AMIA, just to get his impressions on what he heard, what he took away, because he's also a Microsoft partner and very involved in the NAV ecosystem. And his view, which we wrapped up in an article, and we'll post a link, is that the information was sharpened and more precise, like I was just saying, but he needs even more, and other vendors who sell into the Dynamics Nav channel need even more. They need more of a horizon to look out to. They need more specific information if they are going to really make future investments in the product. So there's a very serious and specific concern that he has that there's real decision making happening, and without better guidance, that might get some of that decision making might be to not go forward with selling into the NAV space or investing in that, which is significant, especially for a lot of these companies that are currently there, and Microsoft obviously needs a healthy channel.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that was his biggest kind of critique or recommendation to Microsoft, is that he wants more, and he says partners need more than what they were given. I think you have to take that in context that Microsoft had moved fairly quickly to shore up what the message that they were bringing in to those events. From the 2 weeks between North American and the Europe AMIA events, they changed their tone fairly quickly, and it just wasn't all there yet. So I think they were also, maybe implication was, give us a little more time before we give you the full roadmap, because maybe it's not fully formed yet. But definitely a step, as you if you look from North America to EMEA to NAVARG Summit, definitely an improving sequence of messages and explanation of planning that's I think won back the confidence that they may have started to lose a bit at the North American event in September. So a lot still to be learned, but I think the main news is that that NAV continues, and that that it will be a part of the Dynamics 365 space going forward.
Sure. It seems like there's a little more applause this time than there has been at events earlier in the year, but a cautious applause.
Yeah, caution and wait and see. And I think if there's frustration, it's at how long it's taking to bring all this to fruition. I mean, the Dynamics 365 brand was rolled out a year ago, or I'd have to check my notes. But now, we're looking at sometime in 2018 before it starts to sort of, through its second iteration, starts to sort of take form more cohesively. And everyone's I think all these different interest groups are very eager to see how it takes form, so they can sort of feel more comfortable understanding what it'll really look like when it gets to its final form. Right now, it's sort of in a bit of a limbo state, with you have the AX side, which I know we'll talk about in a second here, that's already fully branded 365. You have the CRM, enterprise stuff that's already branded 365. Then you have NAV coming into 365, which makes for a little bit of confusion. And then you have the legacy products that aren't going to move forward. They're not going to move into the 365 brand, I should say. They will move forward, but GP and SL, which have futures, just not 365 futures.
Sure. Finally, from in the NAV and Tenerife camp, AI apps and Office 365, why NAVARG Summit boosted Dynamics NAV optimism. This by Maher Malki. He's a Dynamics NAV program manager with Western Computer.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly. It's always good to get perspective from folks who are in the field, and Maher's clearly someone who's invested in the success of NAV for clients. And I agree, there's a lot to be excited about with the product. It's clearly a product team that is pushing to make itself a part of the larger Microsoft vision, which is all for the best. I think if you sat through sort of the finer, not just sort of the roadmap session, but those other sort of lower level sessions to talk about how NAV becomes more ingrained into Office 365 and the benefits of that story, it's convincing, and the work is it's no small thing. I wrote earlier on about the plans for the updated APIs for NAV that will expose it as a RESTful service and allow for it to work with external systems in a much more sort of industry standard, modern way that other systems would appreciate, whether it's something like an HR system or something like maybe e-commerce, or really any range of other kinds of systems. it's doing it in a way that it hasn't in the past. And it was sort of one of those things that made Nav look crusty and old and hard to integrate with. There are signs like that when you look at some of the demos of how it works with Office 365, how it will work in the future, being able to sort of run a lot of key business processes from inside of Outlook, at least in theory. The push to do those things I think is important to the vision of where the product's going. And vision's worth something, even if the solution's not quite there yet.
Sure. Well, let's move on to Dynamics 365 AXA Summit. First up, Dynamics 365 AX in the enterprise. Microsoft touts strong uptake and shorter implementation cycles.
So it's almost like you're listening to two different conversations sometimes when you talk to customers and you talk to Microsoft. Microsoft so we got a chance to hear from Mohammed Alam, who is the new GM for the Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations team. And he really started off with the success that the cloud product is having. And I think any conversation you're going to have with Microsoft going forward about this product, about the 365 Finance and Operations Enterprise, kind of it's couched in that, or not, you have that conversation with the assumption that cloud is successful. We're having great uptake. We've had a ton of go lives in it, and they've been very rapid. They have been, a matter of 2 to 6 months often, as opposed to years of planning and so forth. And they're very proud of that, and they think it's proof positive that their approach is working. On the other side, and so they have some very interesting. I actually thought they did a really nice job at AXA Summit to bring some interesting customers on stage to talk about how they have used the 365 product, especially if they were sort of AX 2012 or legacy, older AX users that have either upgraded or added onto it with the new product, which is a pretty interesting value proposition, I guess, of how, a user group attendee who owns an older version might consider taking on the 365 version for particular workloads, so for just retail or just for new business units that they're bringing online or something like that. So there's clearly that idea that these smaller department level wins are important.
Yeah.
Trying to think what else in terms of that, that sort of keynote where we got to sort of hear from Mohammed Alam for the first time. He's someone who's been in the Dynamics AX space for many years now. I think he's primarily worked with AX. I think he's had a couple other roles in Microsoft. I think he might have worked his way up doing some stuff on the CRM side as well. But it's funny. I mean, you hear him talk. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the influence of other previous leaders in this product area speaking. You can hear that it sounds like he spent time with Mike Ehrenberg. You can hear that he spent time with Sri Srinivasan, who was previously the GM for the AX product line, and just a lot of the same turns of phrase, a lot of the same sort of way of answering questions. I mean, clearly knows the product inside and out, understands who a lot of these customers are, which I think is probably going to win him some good support. I think his presentation was well received in that regard. I've never met him or talked to him. I got the sense he might be a little bit of a challenge to get extra information out of, if you will, to really kind of dig down, because I think he knows what he wants to talk about, and I think he's got a very strong sort of ability to deliver the message that he's there to deliver. That was my first impression on who he was and how he did. So overall, I think it was a good first sort of introduction for anyone who hadn't met him before.
Yeah, and he really is a sort of a child of AX. He supposedly left SAP, or he had worked with SAP and Oracle, right, and moved to Microsoft to work with Axapta.
Yeah, so that would have been, like you said, I think 12, 13 years ago is when he did that. I think he's fairly young, as far as sort of Microsoft sort of higher level managers go. And I think he's risen very steadily, it sounds like, from, doing consulting to managing consulting services to managing, other R&D groups to now sort of managing all of R&D. So yeah, that's seems to be sort of one of those people on that sort of very challenging management track that Microsoft has.
Sure. Next up, we have, and I know these were some folks were eagerly anticipating some answers here. Microsoft updates Dynamics AX users on D365 Finance and Operations Enterprise on-prem and hybrid plans.
Right. This was not something Alam talked about much in his keynote, but I was able to sit in on a briefing about those plans, the on-premise or local business data deployment model plans. I was also able to and also on the Cloud plus Edge as it's called, which is basically a hybrid, those plans. And yeah, those are very much in work. And, it was funny because they've obviously put a lot of thought into how they're going to make those scenarios work for customers, what limitations are going to put on it, what technical limitations maybe aren't going to be supported. And again, as I said a few minutes ago, it's all sort of wrapped up in the theme that you really want to go to the cloud unless you really can't justify it. And so, anything that's going to be offline is you really we'll have to take a close look at what those limitations are going to be in terms of, I guess, architectural things. I think there's going to be some limitations on what kind of scale they're going to support. It'll be like single instance AX deployments only, as opposed to, I guess, larger, more complex ones. I'm not really an architect. I couldn't speak any more to what that really means, but I think that is a limitation where you can really scale out a cloud deployment with Microsoft's blessing. I think people will be a little on their own if they try to do more complex deployments. They have to use Azure Server Service Fabric, if I have that name right, on-prem, which is just I think a fairly heavy-duty enterprise, architecture system that is going to be used to run the AX related servers that make up the overall system and network them together. So it's not going to be a small effort to run the local business data. It'll still require using lifecycle services for not sharing any data, but for doing deployment planning and configuration stuff to some extent. So there's going to be a lot for customers and partners to learn. There's not even a preview yet of the I believe of the local business data. There is a preview of the hybrid, the Cloud plus Edge scenario, and really the assumption, as I learned, is that this is for setting up a site basically for synchronization or for sort of being there when the internet connectivity goes down, so that you can sustain your operations in critical scenarios and keep working with the D365 system, assuming that within a matter of not too many hours. I mean, I think it's probably safe to assume that they're hoping it's less than a day that local sites go offline and come back. That once they come back, there's a sort of invisible, seamless, if you will, sync back to the master in the cloud, and at that point, business just continues unbothered. I think it's a big challenge, though. I think that just listening to the way they imagine that process working, it's no small feat to make that work, and it gets more complicated if you have multiple sites that could be offline at the same time or at different times, and how you reconcile that master data and those transactions, or whatever it is that has to be reconciled back to the master. So I think that's really where they're spending a lot of time. That's in developer preview, though. And I think they're working with, people in that preview to really flesh out some of those details. And they're aiming for something in 2018 to have for that, I believe.
Okay. There almost seems to be a bit of a grudging quality to this. Like, okay, here's your on-prem and your hybrid.
Yeah. It is. I mean, it's not what Microsoft wants to spend its time on. I don't think if it had its vote, but I think it recognizes it has to. There's enough companies. So I think Microsoft's view is, it thinks that some of the companies that say they need local don't really need local, but they say they do. So Microsoft's going to continue to try to win over those who get more of them to change their mind. And then for those that don't, they'll offer the local business data option. But, I don't think they want to it's like they have to put quite a bit of work in, but it's really, that's really not where their heart is. Maybe, sure. As you were saying, so they say, "Oh well, I guess I'll do it if I have to," and that's how it sounds. I mean, that's and you'll always get a better and more enthusiastic response to how to use cloud than how to use local business data. But there are countries, there are regions even where I think a lot of companies will go for it when it's available, but it could be a little bit more time.
Now let's move on to Dynamics 365 CRM UG Summit. Here, the big story was the CRM V9 rollout.
Yeah, boy, we're just this has been it's like I can't jumping from like one kind of big set of announcements to the next set of announcements. It's like this podcast is like being on a trapeze or something, like going from one bar to the next here. So yeah, that was it was definitely an important event for the CRM side of the D365 family as well. V9 is big, and I've talked about it to some extent already on, I think, in past podcasts. So this was the release that was previewed to partners way back in July, and they loved it. They were just raving over what they were finding. It's got some very, very important changes. I'll just highlight a couple of them off the top of my head here. Just structurally, it is the release that will kind of architecturally separate out the XRM engine from each of the individual applications that use it. So you have the XRM engine that with sort of contacts, and I don't know exactly which entities in it, like the building block entities. And then you have a sales app that's going to have really leads and opportunities. You're going to have a customer service app that has its own set of entities for cases and whatnot. And then marketing app that's not out yet. A second tier sales app for sort of the smaller business or for customers that don't want as much functionality. That's not out yet either, but that can be built on top. Those can all be built sort of separately on top of that engine. And you may not see another major release like this for either ever or not for a long time, because now what it means is each of those apps can be updated on their own with big or small updates without really forcing a whole sort of server level update. So those server level enhancements can be done almost asynchronous from, or just independent of the apps themselves, which is pretty nice. And I think that's one of the things partners really like. It'll sort of, I think, free the team up to have product managers leading each of those apps and potentially hopefully being innovative on it and doing competitive things that will make it very competitive. So yeah, that's probably, to me, that's the big headline. But then also, of course, they want more of the Microsoft story baked into each of those areas. LinkedIn integration is moving forward, which I think is cool. We actually just did a webcast today that got a lot of interest, that was hosted by the team at Power Objects, and they talked about some of the various ways that integration is going to work. It's going to be CRM to LinkedIn to CRM to Sales Navigator, Sales Navigator to CRM. There's going to be this marketing and sales side inside of LinkedIn's own apps that's going to have to tie back to CRM. All these, there's use of other features in the LinkedIn universe for sales and marketing related stuff. So there's a whole lot there. I remember at Summit itself, one partner stood up and asked Microsoft sort of, what's the story with Flow and LinkedIn and CRM? So because the idea that you could sort of use Flow to sort of help pull some of those components together for a salesperson, and that's, I think, where you're going to start to see some of the limitations, because I think one person even asked about sort of using hitting LinkedIn to even get more access to leads or more access to potential contacts. And that's really where I think LinkedIn draws the line. There won't be any, and Microsoft representatives even said this explicitly. I mean, part of the roadmap does not include sort of helping you just sort of find more leads in LinkedIn in ways that are outside the terms of service today. So that's really not going to change. It's not going to be like Dynamics 365 customers, get sort of new leads from LinkedIn that other, CRM users that connect to LinkedIn Sales Navigator don't get. It's not going to be that kind of a thing. But I think they're going to try to make that integration better, faster than they do with the other CRMs out there. By maybe not. I don't know if it'll be better than Salesforce, but like kind of that's the top tier. Making those integrations the best first, and then giving other vendors a chance to tie in with APIs and stuff later. But that was all sort of part of. I think that was all part of the the coming out party for the V9 umbrella that's out there. So people are definitely very favorable on it. I think there's a lot of interest and excitement. I'm going to hopefully do more coverage of that. I hopefully plan to get at least another MVP on the podcast soon to talk about V9 and some of the implications for it with customers.
Okay. Next, we have a couple of partner perspective on what these developments mean to SMBs. First, and this is post Directions EMEA, Microsoft shares core beliefs that Dynamics SMB partners can embrace. This by Gus Kravenborg of QBS Group and Partner Masterclass.
Yeah, so an insightful piece by Gus. I don't want to try to paraphrase it too carefully, but he had some very good observations, I think, of what the future direction is and why it matters for partners. The idea of ending, and this is something we haven't touched on, but the idea of ending the business edition and enterprise edition model of Dynamics 365, I think that is going to go over fairly well. What are some of the other that CSP remains very important, and that's obviously something that Gus's company QBS Group obviously cares about because they are involved as in the CSP program as I think a tier 1, if I'm got that correct. CSP and working with a lot of affiliates, and that's really their bread and butter. So I think a lot of these implications are really do matter to sort of Microsoft's larger strategy. Implications matter to these Dynamics partners, and if they were paying attention to the Directions EMEA and even some of the stuff that was said at the UG Summit, certainly very important to their future plans, which kind of, I guess, ties even back to what we were saying at the beginning.
Sure. Next up, with Microsoft Dynamics 365 SMB plans firmed, NAV and CRM partners can plan for a bright future. This by Technology Management's James Crowder.
So we should post a link back to the podcast I did with James just a couple of weeks ago. He was at Directions EMEA, and then he flew to Nashville for Summit. So he had some unique perspective, and he shared a lot of it with me in that podcast, and it's worth a listen. But I think what's so interesting about James is his willingness to sort of share his opinion based on what he's seeing at the time, and then adjusting it as the situation on the ground changes and sharing it again. So he's very candid. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. And I think he felt that what he was hearing called for a bright future for NAV and CRM partners, and that Microsoft's positioning itself in a way that he thinks will be successful. And I certainly listen to James and take him at his word with his assessments. He's got sort of a unique situation as someone who runs a business that caters to both NAV and CRM customers, and implements both and has good knowledge of both in context. So he's someone worth listening to, and he writes about what he sees on his own blog, and we've been lucky enough to have him contribute to us as well. I think there's obviously things he's going to be looking for. Price points is really price points, and licensing decisions are really going to be the next critical thing, and the timing. So it's like, I think people get it in terms of what Microsoft's approach is going to be, but they really do. People like James and Christian Sega and everyone else who's been at these events on the partner side just is really, really eager, I guess you would say, to get that next wave of details, which I suspect is coming in, a matter of the next few months here.
Yeah, and you're right, James. I do find him to be marvelously candid. Also, he's got an open mind, because just 2 weeks earlier he wrote for us, "Does Microsoft really care about the SME business market?" So
yeah, he did, and
quite
he was
a shift.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he wrote, "It's been a good week." This was, I guess, after Directions EMEA. "It's been a good week. The future is bright. I'm feeling confident." So, that says it all, I think, for his outlook.
Sure. Now, with those events behind, let's look ahead to Extreme 365 in November. Here, Jason, this was your analysis. Microsoft channel anxiety. November's Extreme 365 aims to guide Dynamics 365 partners.
So this is one of the later events this season, and it's geared. So Extreme 365 is, used to be Extreme CRM. It's traditionally geared towards CRM partners and professionals. They are broadening their approach out, much like Directions is, to be all about 365, the 365 Dynamics 365 product line. But and they're taking a different approach than, I would say, the Directions event in primarily the way that they have been able to recruit some of the top sort of higher level Microsoft executives to talk about the partner channel progress, maybe in the time since the Inspire WPC event in the summer, and they're really being, I was talking to Joe Corigliano there for this piece, who's one of the people organizing the Extreme event. And in his words and in other people's words too, I mean, there's chaos in the channel in the sense that, for all the great things about these products, the partners don't know exactly what's going on as it relates to how Microsoft is going to support them in selling these products. The shakeup that resulted from Inspire in terms of layoffs in the Microsoft partner team, subsidiaries that are laying people off that support partners, that all leads to uncertainty and gaps in terms of sort of the practical sort of sales ops and marketing support and those components that partners tend to count on Microsoft for giving them leads, for sort of setting expectations and goals. And I think this event is going to be hopefully a chance for partners to get some of that, some sense of that back if they haven't already. It's going to include on the Dynamics side, Alyssa Taylor will be there. Ron Huddleston from One Commercial Partner, who sort of had, I think, created One Commercial Partner. This new approach to working with partners is going to be there. And I believe even James Phillips is going to be there from the R&D product side, who really is setting the whole tone for products. So I mean, they really have a strong set of speakers who hasn't been at these other events, and these are really the decision makers that people should be listening to. So if you're a partner executive that works with 365, it might be worth going just to hear from them, or at least if not, and then following our coverage of the event, because I think it is important for that reason.
Next, we've got a quick recap of 3 thought leadership pieces from experts in the channel. First is, it's not all gloom. Why GDPR is also an opportunity for Microsoft customers and partners. This by Mohammed Mustafa of Microsoft Dynamics 365 MVP in the UK. Here he explores how Microsoft Dynamics solutions provide the necessary tools for GDPR compliance, but they don't guarantee GDPR compliance. It's up to partners and customers to apply the tools effectively.
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting sort of alternate view. We had some other coverage of GDPR. We had some other insights, right, from other writers, but this one was different, I thought. Do you agree?
Oh yeah. He the way he describes it, it's here's your opportunity to do a lot of things that you should do anyway: data cleansing, process remapping, acquiring consents, putting in governance controls. So it's all a lot of work, all of it worthwhile. Likely a lot of it's beyond the work of most customers to do themselves, hence the opportunity for partners.
And I like sort of there's sort of a knowing tone that, Mohammed has seen before a lot of these challenges of trying to get sign off on some of these important needed enhancements or just improvements to systems, and seeing this as an opportunity for that, that's maybe easier to justify. I thought it was a great tack.
Yeah, interestingly, he presented on this topic at Directions AMIA with James Crowder. So that must have been a great session.
Yeah, I imagine.
Next up is the state of mobility with Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM. Is your organization up to speed? This by Robert Feldmar, marketing specialist with Resco.
The thing I found sort of interesting about putting this piece out was that, just to go behind the scenes a little bit, we were initially thinking that this was going to be a piece about where is mobility technology heading? And once we started diving into it with Robert, it became clear that, well, there's a lot of stuff out there even today that can be done with some investment, and it's way ahead of where a lot of companies are. So if you even just look at what's possible today, and work toward achieving more of those capabilities, you're probably going to be much further along in planning for digital transformation, or planning for creating an organization that's much more more agile and effective in today's business climate than you would, even if you're not. It's like let's put aside what the future of mobility is. Let's think about how you can even get to utilize the latest sort of released stuff, which I think is which is just as interesting to me.
Yeah, and a lot of things that were a year ago something that you'd look to a third party for, and we've presented case studies about that. Like maps and route planning, inspections. This is not light duty stuff. This is real mobile utility.
Right.
Yeah. Third, we have Solomon Cloud Solutions to offer Dynamics SL consulting services to Sikich clients.
Yeah, I thought this one was worth just a mention. It's one of the bigger Microsoft partners in North America, Sikich, who do a lot of things, not just Dynamics, but they are going to have Solomon Cloud Solutions service their SL partners. Their SL clients. As Solomon Cloud Solutions are real experts in that, so it certainly makes sense. It also speaks to this part, Sikich plans and priorities as an organization, that they have one eye on serving their clients' current needs, but I think another eye toward what the future is going to be for a company using SL as their ERP of choice. I think don't get me wrong, SL it was going to serve customers for years to come, businesses who use it and who get a lot of value out of it. But I think it's just a nice, interesting little indicator of where the partner side is in terms of selling and servicing and supporting SL for its clients.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a look at next week. Jason, what stories do you have coming up down the pike?
So a few things on my plate here. I'm looking at a pretty interesting story about a Dynamics 365 finance operations enterprise customer that is really trying to forge ahead with continuous testing and continuous integration, and how they're accomplishing that, and how it's going to really tie the AX into their modern sort of DevOps initiatives. So that's one I'm really looking forward to finishing up. We're also looking into accessibility with Dynamics 365, and I'm not sure if we're going to get a piece out of it, but it's certainly something that we're doing a little bit of research on, and what it really means, because I know it's a priority at Microsoft, and Satya Nadella, forget if he authored it, if it was just a feature about him, but I think he did author it. It was maybe an extract from his book about his own experience in learning about the importance of accessibility, given that he has a son with special needs, and the work that Microsoft does as an organization to support accessibility for people with disabilities of various sorts, and the way computers can still be helpful to those people with the right accessibility capabilities supported, and making sure the applications on those systems can take advantage of those accessibility options. The third thing is we're going to be hopefully start to look at the container technology, so Docker and other container tech that Microsoft supports through Azure, and tying that back to its use in Dynamics products too.
Great. And I will have a compelling look at workflows in a complex environment, a case study of Big Brothers Big Sisters Canada. And this is about D365's native workflows. what can a nonprofit social work organization tell manufacturers and sales orgs? You will be surprised, I think. So that'll be a pretty interesting feature. Next as well, an executive Q&A with SAS Plaza's CEO, Baron Jan van Manen. And here we'll be digging into Tenerife and Azure. And finally, a look at Microsoft Digital Sports Platform. It seems that Microsoft EU has a division called Microsoft Sport. And this platform links sports organizations to fans with new service-based digital utility. And we'll talk with both Microsoft and with the Spanish football team Valencia CF.
Love those sports stories.
Yeah, they're never dull, and they're highly complex organizations.
Yeah, and they really need the systems and to work in the way that they work.
Yeah, and you think of a massive stadium full of people, a well-run sports organization has probably touched every one of those people in some way or another, or will touch.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So next up, I guess we're going to wrap up here.
Well, thanks, Dan. I'm glad we got to get back into the swing of these news review episodes. We'll have to get back into them more regularly here.
Will do. I guess we've had a lot of great guests, one after the other. Do we have any? Can we announce any coming up?
I'm not ready to announce any coming up, but there will be some returning guests and definitely some new ones as well. And but as we're maybe kind of blending in the wrap up here, let me just say this has been another episode of the MSDW Podcast. If you want to get in touch about being on the podcast or a topic you want us to cover, you can definitely drop me a line, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, we are MS Dynamics World. Dan, you are MS Dynamics World. And how can we reach you?
I am at M as in Matthew, AUR, N as in Nickel, O, at msdynamicsworld.com.
Great, thank you. And until next time, we're MS Dynamics World signing off.